Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to GW Center for Integrative Medicine Zoom podcast. I'm super excited. We have a wonderful speaker today, Sally Norton. I've been known of her work for a very long time. We've been referring patients to her practice for many years, and this whole story of oxalates, which you're going to learn all about in less than an hour, has been on my mind for quite some time. Somewhat controversial topic, so we will unravel all the controversies, I'm sure. So I have Sally's book right here, which I've been reading for past couple of weeks, and actually it's more than reading. It's like this is like a study manual, like a guide. So you have to really like certain parts I've been coming back to multiple times. And if you don't have the book yet, it has raving reviews on Amazon, tons of people sending Sally, as she put it, love stories because they read the book, get off certain foods, treat themselves, get better, and then leave wonderful reviews. So let's jump right in. Sally, you've been in the integrative medicine health field for a long time. Give our listeners a little bit of sort of how'd you get into this? And I know you've done research in the past. What led you to where are you today, and what are you doing today?
Well, I've become this oxalate educator now, which is a real surprise to me. I've been kind of a health geek since I was a little kid, and I have a feeling it goes back to having my tonsils ripped out at age 5 after being shunned from the swimming pool with swimmer's ear and being given this liquid penicillin on a spoon for like strep throat and things as a little tiny kid. Those were not pleasant experiences. So I learned early on, like, health is way better than sickness. And I was really impressed with, well, my grandmother cooked from scratch. My mom believed in gardening and cheap living, but she had rhubarb behind the house, and we were, playing with it, eating it in many different forms. And I had a fairly high oxalate diet growing up. And because I loved my vegetables, unlike all my siblings, I tended to eat the beet greens and the high oxalate foods. And that was not helping me deal with these infections, even as a little girl. But in 7th grade, a science teacher showed us a film strip, that was a long time ago, that claimed that if you ate hot dogs and bad food, it gives you diseases like cancer. And if you ate these other great foods like the vegetables and the cabbage family, you don't get cancer. And I was like, oh, who wouldn't want to know how to live and how to eat? What's the right nutrition so that you stay productive and happy and you're never barred from the swimming pool? Like, this just made inherent sense to me that nutrition was the backbone of good health. And I wanted to be in a position to help people stay and build health. The sad part is I decided to get the nutrition degree when I was 12, and I've never strayed from that. But my education at Cornell University, where I got my nutrition degree, led me astray. Working in public health, I have a master's in public health, and got really interested in holistic healing because I was having all these health problems and nobody was really helping me. The doctors weren't helping me. I had to leave school, go get foot surgery. The physical therapy didn't help. All that ibuprofen and all those orthotics and the crutches, all that didn't help. And I had 30 years of foot problems. In the meantime, I'm like looking for answers. So I ended up going to chiropractors and more, getting more into what we now talk about as complementary and holistic healthcare. But there weren't answers from my surgeon and my pain doctor, who was, a big deal doctor for a major university working for the football team. They weren't able to help me. So, I was lucky enough to meet Susan Gaylord, who helped to co-found with Peter Curtis, the program in integrative medicine at UNC Medical School, and ended up working there and helping to submit and then run a big NIH grant, trying to bring awareness of these other forms of health and healthcare to mainstream conventional practices of medicine, dentistry, nursing, pharmacy, and even public health. And we had very limited success with that.
When was that?
The grant was granted in 1999.
Oh, wow. That's
with like 2 days notice. NIH is like trying to get rid of the money at the end of the budget year. And
that's the time when a lot of things have started, right? I mean, that's the late 90s. There was just a hand, I think it was like academic consortium well, back then, Academic Consortium of Integrative Medicine was just started. Like, I think before 2000, they only had like 7 schools in the consortium. Now it's like massive. You go to these meetings and there's hundreds of different
Well,
attendees.
we at UNC were one of the founding members of that.
That's right.
And I was there at the dawn of all of it. Yeah, so
So
I've been around for a while.
you've been around for a long time. So how did you stumbled up on this whole topic? I mean, because yeah, it's not an everyday conversation that oxalates come up in people's language.
No, it's in fact, it's so foreign to us. Most people never heard the term oxalate.
Right.
And my clients and followers are shocked when they bring it up with their doctors. Their doctors turn their head and go, "What's that?" Like, we in healthcare are not being educated about a basic chemical that's in our diets that's a really big deal to your metabolism. And we've known about this chemical since the dawn of chemistry. It's used throughout bench science all over the place. It's really familiar to real bench scientists. It was a diagnosed condition by 1842 and was for 100 years a condition that you could go to the doctor if you went to the right doctors. It's always been a controversial topic. And that's why you don't hear about it, because it's very sneaky, tricky, criminal, causing some real big deal problems way down low in cell metabolism level, that it just gets away with it. It's like, I always think of oxalate as like the perfect Agatha Christie criminal. Like, you're the last one you're going to suspect for these crimes is little old oxalate hanging around in spinach and these foods we trust.
So let's actually talk about this. So you're right. I think most people probably never heard of this. So what is it? Like, I mean, what is oxalate? And you just told the listeners that we get it from food. It's not just food. We get it from all kinds of things. We get it from some supplements. The oxalates are in a lot of
pollution, polluted air. It's full of it.
Exactly. So it's everywhere. And so what is oxalates in the food? And then why is it so important? And what happens in our body when we consume those things?
Yeah. So we talk about oxalate often in the plural, oxalates, because it's a molecule that changes forms a lot. So it starts off as oxalic acid, which is a 2-carbon acid. It's called a dicarbolic acid because each carbon has 2 oxygens on it. And that's pretty powerful. It's a powerful chelator and acid. We've been using it as a cleaning product in industrial chemicals since the late 1700s. And it's been a household cleaner since then, really. It's had different names over time, and it's still available straight as a wood bleach. You use it to clean out rust of radiators. You can lift the rust out of a patio. It's in Barkeeper's Friend and Zud. It's very great chelator. It grabs minerals. Its favorite mineral is calcium, and calcium likes it too. They're in agreement that they belong together. So it's really easy for plants to create calcium oxalate crystals. So plants build oxalic acid from vitamin C often. And the botanists don't get funded as well as the medical people do. So it's tricky to get a lot of research on this. So they're still like wondering how plants produce oxalate and why and all that. And there's lots of whys, and there may be many ways, but one of the key ways is the plant creates vitamin C that easily degenerates into oxalate. In fact, just sitting around in a bottle, vitamin C could potentially become oxalic acid. So now you've got oxalic acid that can grab minerals like calcium, and the plants use this to build specific crystals. The crystals do a lot for the plants. And in your body, the oxalic acid and the crystals that you eat both have different effects. The crystals are directly abrasive and cause, direct damage to mucosal cells. They're designed, especially the rapide shape, which is a double-pointed toothpick type, really tiny irritant that can puncture 2 cells deep, which is really deep when you're just a mucosal lining. That's double deep.
And so that's present in our mostly in raw, right? So like when you start cooking, do those crystals change?
They don't change in heat unless you get to like forest fire temperatures of 400 or 500 degrees. So forest fire soot, that's the crystals in the bark of the trees, is often primarily full of now altered crystals that no longer are technically calcium oxalate, but boiling and baking and steaming and even pressure cooking does nothing for these crystals, which can last 50,000 years in the soil. It can leach out some of the acid. If you boil broccoli and a few vegetables, you can leach some of the oxalic acid, which is even more toxic than the crystals, into the water if you throw away the water. But if you're just throwing it in a pot of soup, that does nothing. In fact, leaching oxalic acid into a liquid increases its toxicity because its bioavailability goes up.
Right. So what happens? So there's two things. There's an oxalate crystals, and then there's oxalic acid. So let's say that somebody just made a spinach soup or whatever, and then they consumed the whole thing. They didn't boil the water out. They didn't put. So what happens in the body when somebody takes that?
Yeah. So the crystals, of course, are still there and they're abrasive, but the oxalic acid is potentially binding up minerals in your food and making them unavailable to absorb. So it makes your food nutritionally deficient, especially in calcium and other minerals, or that bound molecule, or what we call the ion, the free oxalic acid, is dissolved in the water fraction that just floats between the digestive cells. So you're absorbing water from your food and dissolved minerals and other ions, including oxalic acid. So it just floats between the cells and gets into the hepatic circulation, sending it straight to the liver. So 100% of the oxalic acid that you absorb goes straight to the liver, and the amount you absorb depends on the state of your gut. If there's inflammation or other forms of leakiness or damage, you're going to get much higher levels of absorption. So instead of maybe 10% on a really healthy gut, which is getting to be a rare bird these days, most people have some degree of gut inflammation.
So in a perfect world, 90% of the oxalates just pass into the stool.
That's right.
Okay. So
that would be the perfect condition that we all believe in our textbooks. In fact, that rate of absorption keeps changing over time, and there's a lot of big questions still. But when you've got inflammation, even you can get scared or trauma, and it turns on inflammation, and that might affect how much oxalate you're absorbing.
So it goes into the liver, and then what happens from that point? So it goes.
Well, the liver is busy defending itself because the liver has open sinusoids where all the cells of the liver are widely welcoming everything that comes in from the gut, so it can handle it and manage it and deal a lot. The liver is amazing. So you got direct oxalic acid coming right into the cells of the liver. That causes the liver cells to use a lot of glutathione to protect themselves from damage. So you end up with glutathione deficiency or depletion in the liver. You also probably get some degree of little bubbles of lipids forming around the little nanocrystals of oxalate that start forming as they pass through. So then it's still in the vascular system. It's affecting the endothelial lining of the vascular system. It's affecting the red blood cells and the white blood cells. And within 40 minutes of a meal already, even though it takes really 4 or 5 hours to really get to a peak of absorption, and it's a 24-hour passage time, there's a long period of time of oxalate coming into the bloodstream, into the liver, affecting the gut, causing gut problems. But within 40 minutes, the white blood cells are now putting out pro-inflammatory cytokines because they themselves are damaged and in trouble, and they're less able to do their jobs in fighting infection. So you get immediate effects on the immune system. So there's acute effects right away on the endothelial lining, the gut, the immune cells, and the liver. And then it moves on to the heart. Is the next organ, just a few inches up from the liver. You got to pass through that little diaphragm to the heart, into the lungs, back to the heart, back to general circulation. And it can, in the capillary beds, there's high pressure. So this little ion is pushed into the tissues pretty easily. And sometimes it's picked up either by lymph or the veins. Sometimes it's picked up by the cells. Whether it gets stuck in those tissues is increasing, whether a gland cells tend to pull things in. So certain cells welcome more and more molecules and pull things in more. But when there is infection in those tissues, any kind of inflammation or damage, you have stickiness and accumulation. So the oxalates start getting stuck in tissues. And then, the ones that don't get stuck get passed to the kidneys, and the kidneys are the main way we get rid of it and take it out of the body. The liver does not detox oxalate.
Let me get this right. So if you have a very high amount of glutathione, which we often give probably yeah, I don't know what percent, but lots of our patients on glutathione or NAC, which builds up the glutathione over time. So is that going to be protective enough when people have a high oxalate diet, or is there going to be some escape mechanism that not all the oxalates can be detoxed by the liver?
None of the oxalates are detoxed by the liver, none at all. The body's using glutathione just to protect the liver cells themselves. It does not conjugate oxalate in any way. There is no way. The liver actually produces additional oxalate. So after the blood comes to the liver, it leaves the liver with higher levels of oxalate than it had when it entered the liver, not less.
So the
Because
body
the liver-
cannot easily detoxify. It can't take the oxalate and then convert it into some neutral form for excretion.
Not at all. We have
Liver
no way to
passes
do it.
it. Right. So tell us what happens after. So now the oxalates circulating in the blood, they may get deposited in different tissues, right? You mentioned heart, right? Lungs. So what happens after that?
Yeah, so there's different things that are happening in different parts of the body. You know, the local tissues are busy trying to deal with this stuff that's sticking around. And so there's lots of different stories of what's happening there. But most of it's landing in the, renal tissues where the kidneys are having to concentrate it, because the kidneys concentrate all the junk they collect from the blood to pee it out to save you water. And there in the kidney tubules, it can get kind of dicey. The kidneys have many ways of protecting us from it coagulating, because the crystals can stick to each other and they form kidney stones. That's the main kidney stone that most people get, is a calcium oxalate kidney stone. And the primary cause is literally our diet. And your average urologist is really not fully aware of that.
It's pretty common, and it's extremely common condition, right? So the kidney stone.
And it's becoming more common in women. It used to be considered kind of an old guy's problem, but now it's more common in younger and younger women and girls and children. And there's a pretty good correlation with the fact that women are early on in life learn to like their vegetables and their spinach salads, and can be concerned about their weight by the time they're age 10, and be eating more of these vegetables, because the modern solution to all health problems is to just increase your vegetables. And unfortunately, the popular ones are the ones like spinach and chard and beet greens that are high in oxalate. So you see it happening in younger and younger ages, and we're also depending on peanuts and potatoes and other high oxalate foods. And so, there's lots of argument for the way we are living in the last 25 years is increasing this kidney stone problem for many reasons, but the diet being the main culprit. So yeah, kidney stone is an ugly thing to get, but interestingly, despite the younger and younger ages, the prevalence numbers seem to hang around 12 or 15% of the population is prone to kidney stones, because we have many mechanisms to protect us from the kidney stone formation and the kidney stone getting so big that it lodges in the kidneys. And so there's a genetic subset of us who will have kidney stones as their first sign of oxalate poisoning, but most of us have many other problems and not the kidney stones.
Right.
It's really interesting.
I think that's so this is now we entering the sort of controversial territory, because like if you talk to the urologist and they seeing oxalate stones probably daily, multiple times throughout the day, right? I mean, that's what they do for a living. I mean, I think that's outside of the sort of any controversy that if you've ever had an oxalate stones, it would be irresponsible of you or your physician to not recommend lowering oxalates, just because, I mean, it's self-explanatory. But I mean, it's a tip of an iceberg, according to not just your book, but I mean, also according to some of the patients I've seen. And yet it's highly controversial. I mean, I was just looking at the Andrew Weil video where he openly says there is no problem, like doesn't exist. If you don't have a problem with oxalate kidney stones, don't worry about oxalates, eat your vegetables like that. So that's Andrew Weil, right? So if he says that, then a lot of people follow that. And yet in our practices, we see all the time. I mean, I would take patients off of oxalates, and significant proportion of patients will get better. And you don't even have to, you'll tell us how you do this, but you taught me some years ago that you don't have to do it very aggressively. You just remove a couple of foods, you see what happens, and often people get better. So walk us through that. So tons of different symptoms. There's, by the way, a wonderful chart of symptoms, like sort of, as you, I think, call it, an assessment tools that you in resources, self quizzes, where you can basically look at risk, symptoms, and exposures and try to figure out whether your symptoms fit very well whether you have a problem or not.
Yeah, and sometimes it only takes the risk side, because if you have had bariatric surgery or a long time of some kinds of gut problems, you're going to be what's called a hyperabsorber, which means very small amounts of oxalate in the diet make a big deal, because you can absorb as much as 60% of the oxalate in your diet. That's 6 times higher. So you could eat 1/6 the amount of oxalate as the next guy and have more oxalate problems. So the risk thing is really an important piece as well. But if you're growing up in modern life, you're growing up on fundamentally peanuts, potatoes, and chocolate. You can start your baby on sweet potatoes. And mothers don't know that little baby kidneys can't handle oxalate, and we don't have any awareness of oxalate or where it is in our diet. So mothers don't even have a choice to protect their babies and their children, let alone, all through the lifespan. And as you age, you get more and more accumulation of health problems that can be even just all from oxalates. And it just takes time. And, it's like compounding interest. You keep eating this every day for years, and eventually things start falling apart. And the more you get sick, the more you're like looking for answers from Andrew Weil, who says, eat a lot of vegetables to fix everything. So and this is the pat answer now in public health.
I brought this up actually just because I just saw it, but I trust Andrew Weil. I mean, the guy is brilliant, and I co-published most of my books with him. And yet figure like this doesn't necessarily have a full awareness of complexity of this topic, which I think it's understandable, and because it is in a way pretty much still a completely hidden topic. Like
right, and that's why people like me. I worked in a medical center with doctors as friends and colleagues, and my colleagues on the integrated medicine grant were homeopaths and acupuncturists and the best of the best in the triangle in the whole state of North Carolina. I had affiliations and friendships with all stripes of healthcare on both sides of the conventional versus holistic and complementary side. And nobody could help me. They all wanted to help me because I was like this centerpiece bringing them together. Mm-hmm. And the ones who are aware of like total health issues couldn't help me. I couldn't help me with all my education and all the things I'm teaching people, and so, it's not known. That's why when I finally did figure it out, I'm like, how is anyone going to get help?
How did you figure it out for yourself first?
Well, the very first thing that alerted me that there was a vulvar pain foundation in North Carolina, like 40 minutes from where I used to work, was an attack of vulvar pain for myself. Now, I had over the years on and off itchiness and like needed Monistat a lot, and had my gynecologist said, you have really thin skin and just issues, but nothing really like chronic vulvar pain. But I went through, but on and off some of that, this mildly, stuff you can ignore. But I had a 3-day period where it was not ignorable. It was really evil pain for me. And I literally called out into the stratosphere of God and said, somebody cut these off because I don't want genitals. I was really unhappy with only 3 days of pain. And my husband found the Vulvar Pain Foundation, and they're doing this weird thing of saying pelvic pain and is an oxalate problem for many people. And if you change your diet, it helps. So I bought their stuff, and, I'm like, pain will humble somebody. And, but I was still working. I'm working, writing research grants in public health and helping my fellow colleagues write complicated research projects for NIH and put together complicated budgets and all of this stuff. So I'm doing a lot of brain work. I'm busy with work, and I'm struggling with my health and my brain. I didn't really fully get it. And the Vulvar Pain Foundation did not tell me about accumulation and deaccumulation, which throws a huge monkey wrench into understanding your response when you start taking off your high oxalate foods. For me, I was a sweet potato addict, eating them every day and having Swiss chard still a couple times a week, and grew up on Swiss chard. So that got me thinking, I need to know about oxalates in foods. And I wasn't perfect at knowing about it. Luckily, you don't have to be. But I thought it was just pelvic pain. I didn't know it could cause a myriad of other problems. So, my pelvic pain didn't last long. So my big problem at the time was that now I needed to quit my job. I needed a hysterectomy. I'm exhausted. I can hardly function. I have this hysterectomy. They have to take it all out. They find a big mess in there. They find endometriosis I didn't know I had, loose blood, scarring on the colon. The ovaries are a mess. We're on epidural. So we're having a conversation while I'm cut wide open. And the surgeon goes, your ovaries are a mess. And I'm like, really? How long? Like for 4 years or so? Because I had been having these perimenopause symptoms for the last 4 years and breakthrough bleeding and weird stuff. He goes, no, like forever. And so they whipped it all out. And after the surgery, I just didn't get better. I just got more and more and more fatigued. So my endocrinologist sent me to the sleep lab, and the sleep lab study showed, this is all the electronics,
Mhm.
the brain arousals, 29 per hour, which would explain why it was getting hard to think, read. I mean, it was to the point where I'd go get the mail, I'd look at it and go, I'll look at this later, because I didn't have the mental energy to read my own mail. So I went on this long search for how you fix sleep disorder and learned about, endotoxins in the gut, and it has to be that. And I got to fix the gut problem. It's always fix the gut first, fix the gut first. So I had this sort of like, well, I don't have vulvar pain, so it doesn't matter about oxalates. So I put back to sweet potatoes.
Mhm.
And as I did that, and also trying to fix the gut, I was adding kiwi because I knew I was adding oxalate. At least I knew. Now that I knew that I was adding this kiwi, oxalate, eventually it made sense. When I started doing that, it took August, September, October. It took me 3 months on daily kiwi to notice I was stiff as anything. I was becoming really, really stiff and old, and my arthritis was coming back. I had terrible arthritis during.
Basically, what you're telling us, on your own, you biohacked your own health, or not the reverse of biohacked, right? So you caused the problem and then you learn to fix it.
Yeah. Thanks to Joanne Yon, who founded the Vulvar Pain Foundation 30 years ago and has been this little lone wolf out there in modern times. She's really the innovator of modern awareness of oxalate, and she's a small shop and she's a small foundation. And it really was it's her work that has been the entry. So I'm really grateful to her. And then, yeah, my body started to teach me. So when you start to know when you're eating oxalates, which no one does, and you really pay attention, you can start to see the connection. And that's what's so amazing, is that when I went on the diet for real, my sleep disorder cleared up. My brain came back. My feet came back, like a whole long list. The arthritis went away, a whole long list, like the long list, the
Right.
entire list.
So I just want to bring this up. So there's a whole list of symptoms that can be oxalate related. There are whole tables of symptoms and the quizzes, as I mentioned in the book. So everything is nicely outlined for the reader. And I don't think we have time to go in there, but I think what I do want to point out a couple of kind of key points. So one, I mean, there's a tremendous overlap of the symptoms with all kinds of other things. So I think I like how you try to simplify it for the patients, but of course they're going to have other problems simultaneously, and so of course the book shouldn't really substitute for medical care. But in reality, because it overlaps, I think that's how often the real serious oxalate issues are missed. Because even integrative practitioners who don't fully understand this, or even partially like me, I feel like I'm only partially understanding this. They're not going to get it because they can't. They're not going to connect the dots. They're going to concentrate on something else. One thing I really, that's a personal question that I always have. So we're doing a lot of different functional medicine tests, not just our practice, but other practices. And, we see the oxalates in the urine, and there's not just one oxalate marker, like the tests like urine, what's called OATS, organic acid in the urine, and then Nutrival and Genova. I mean, this test will give you 3-4 different oxalate markers, and we see the markers elevated in, I don't know, at least 15-20% of patients. And that's usually when it's not actually the entry point. I often start thinking about this even ahead of that, but quite often, if that's really obviously high, then we don't even discuss other things. We often drop right in. I know you don't necessarily endorse those tests and you don't use them because you don't really think it's needed, but do you think there's some value for those tests, at least for practitioners who are completely clueless, and what should they do when they see that elevation?
Well, the value of the test is it gives something concrete for the patient to understand. If you're lucky enough to catch the positive moment. The downside of the test is people assume, especially providers assume, that you can somehow eliminate oxalate as a concern if you don't see the elevation in the urine.
Right,
which is a complete mistake. You know, I had an O test in 2009 that showed I was perfect. I had zero, zilch, no oxalate problem whatsoever.
It's a classic story of hanging on to the toxin, which you have to know how to do to apply the test appropriately. I mean, we see the same
Well,
metals.
if you understand the oxalate, let me explain this to you, because I think the entire audience needs to get this. When there's a dietary oxalate problem going on, you get this peak 4 or 5 hours after you've eaten a high oxalate food. And by the time you're going to bed, you've got 3 or 4 peaks all overlapping from each meal that you've had. And typically people are eating some degree that's more than you can handle in every meal. So at bedtime, you're at your most toxic with oxalate, but the bloodstream does not like oxalate hanging around. It's very dangerous to start messing up calcium levels. You're going to have heart problems very quickly, and it's messing the immune system. It's messing up the red blood cells, causing anemia, hemolytic anemia, and it's just really serious. The body is smart. It knows about oxalate and knows it shouldn't be in the bloodstream. So it removes it overnight. And by the time you wake up in the morning, the first morning urine may be loaded with oxalates because you're clearing them. But your second morning urine, that's the one you use for the O test.
Correct.
Has almost
none.
No.
No. That's the first morning urine. The
The
first
overnight one.
It must be used.
When I did it in 2009, I think they wanted us to do
No, you did the
the
wrong
second one.
No, it must be the first morning urine. It's very clear on every test, and that's partially why they want this. They want oxalates.
Right.
They also want some other things that concentrate throughout the night. That's actually
because it's telling you what the metabolic situation is overnight, which is so important, because this is when the body is doing its housekeeping.
Well, maybe
body's busy.
maybe
You
that's
may be
why,
sleeping.
maybe in our practice we're seeing more oxalates because we're very clear. You have to get the first morning urine with every patient.
Good. Because back when I was doing it, I'm pretty sure the suggested method was wait for the next one.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's not correct.
Well, yeah, that's not good.
No,
so
I don't
again, you get this sampling error really easily with oxalates, and it's not just on the daily circadian changes, because oxalate excretion in people with oxalate problems, according to the work of Clive Solomons, he looked at the urine every single void for nearly 4,000 women, and he saw in the women with the vulvar pain, there was these weird, really bad pathologic spikes, 2 or 3 during the day. So the other 3 urines or 5 urine, if you've got an oxalate problem, you're a frequent urinator anyway. You might have 10 urine, 20, you may be running the bathroom all the time. And if you got overnight urination, that's one of these big signs that your bladder can't cope with all this oxalate.
And so, so basically, in that case, the oxalate just becomes an irritant, right? And then so in both the bladder is triggered, and then if there is a big, I'm presuming it's a direct contact with vulvar tissue when the pain occurs, right?
Well, that's a big question of what the mechanism is of the vulvar pain, because nobody's bothered to study it because they're quick to dismiss it. Clive did some work, and he was outside the institutions by the time he was doing this consulting. It's harder to publish when you're not inside an institution. So he didn't really push hard to publish all of his work. And the little bit that was published was dismissed out of hand quickly by other authors. So they haven't pursued understanding the mechanism, but there are multiple mechanisms in the bladder. Some people are prone to mast cell activation and other forms of immune engagement. And eventually, with chronically high oxalate in your urine, you develop a situation where you have perma rash in your bladder that's really tender all the time. And you can have so much bladder pain that it can destroy your sleep, which makes you super depressed. You're not sleeping right. It can be very disabling. And surprisingly, I've had interstitial cystitis clients and followers who, the minute they give up the high oxalate foods, they get relief. And they're not running to the bathroom and worrying about getting in the car to go see their kids play soccer.
Yeah, and that's a very difficult to treat condition in the first place.
Very difficult to treat. And it's not the case for everyone. I have several clients who are struggling because the body is full of oxalate. So you're still peeing out high oxalate foods after you stop eating them, or high oxalate urine. After you stop eating the foods, you still got a load of it in the body, cleaning out for 10 years or more. So not everyone gets instant relief. That's also a great confusion that has caused even mainstream medicine and publications to dismiss the diet, even for kidney stones, because they don't recognize this deaccumulation that keeps the urine oxalate levels periodically high. And it's not every void that's going to be high. It's, in fact, there's even evidence of a circadian rhythm for a month, and there's probably annual circadian rhythms going on. So the way the body's managing its toxicity is profoundly complex and sophisticated, way more sophisticated than we are in our thinking.
Okay, so I think you convinced the listeners that they should at least think about it if they have a whole list of problems. So let's talk about this. So let's say that we've established somebody is at risk. Now there is no definitive test, can't follow it. Some tests are maybe there, but so, and then you basically, your approach is you begin to work with the diet right away. You basically start saying, look, what can I do with the patient? What foods that are high in oxalates we can start cutting down? And how do we do slowly? Because it's really important not to sort of just go from high oxalate to no oxalate, and then you have the dump, and then you actually may end up with more problems than you want to handle. So walk us through your basic approach then. And of course, it's all discussed in the book in detail. And like there's a whole charts and tables of how you substitute some foods for others. But just give us a kind of a brief overview, like what would you do? So let's say you have a patient coming to you with interstitial cystitis and we're thinking it's oxalate. So how would you handle, what would you tell your client?
So we're looking at their diet history and their diet loves and their diet, limitations, and being very customized about the approach, and knowing, you may, for the moment, have histamine issues and other issues going on, even salicylates, and there's various things. So you're always wanting to think carefully about the person's, where they are, what their constitutional ways are, both personality wise and physiologically. But it's really simple. Like, what are you relying on as a daily food, and which one of these are you willing to change right away? And so if you're eating keto bread all the time, let's quit the almonds. I think almonds are the most toxic food out there, and people are relying on them for all kinds of ways. So the almond milk, the almond bread, the almond butter, all the snacks and treats covered in almonds, let's start there. And the spinach and the beet greens and the chard, you can live without them. There's plenty of other greens to eat. So they're super easy. If a lot of my guys who are into kidney stones, they're hooked on their potatoes. Potatoes are kind of addictive. So
I just want to make sure that everybody understands it's any potatoes. It includes the sweet potatoes. I think they're a little bit better, but not by much, right?
Well, I think in some ways sweet potatoes are a little bit worse.
Oh, even worse. Okay.
Yeah, I think there's slightly more soluble oxalate in them relative to the white potato. And sweet potato, what really makes these foods bad is that we trust them so much. So sweet potatoes has this halo around them. I thought they were perfect, low allergy food. So I was relying on them because in my vegan years, I made myself allergic to all the legumes and the beans and the soy and the wheat. And so when I was getting off my veganism, I added the sweet potato to fill in for my carbs.
Yeah.
So I was trusting it.
Yeah. I was debating to myself how much we want to go into talking about vegan diets, because I often tell to people there's a reason why we co-evolve with animals, and why we as humans been eating varieties of foods, and just saying no, we shouldn't stop eating all animals is I can understand it for philosophical principles, but for
one little point to make is like the reason dogs love us and we love dogs is because we have this pact. You help us hunt the dog, help the food, and we'll give you some muscle meat, because we humans we want the marrow, the organs, and the fat more than we want the muscle meat. So we can give the lean muscle meat to the dogs and everybody's happy. And so we've been training dogs to help us hunt, and dogs love us back, for a long time. So that love of animals is in our bones, and we want to protect them and love on them and not eat them. And yet we're using animals to eat animals because that's our niche. That is our ecological niche, is hunter, thin the herd, and so on. That's how it's set up for us. We can't.
And I think it's quite clear that anybody who's actually interested in longevity, saying I'm going to be vegan into my entire life, is completely unsustainable. I mean, there are some people, I guess, theoretically, who can thrive with zero animal protein, but the reality is such when you hit certain age and you really have to concentrate on leucine and some of the key essential amino acids. Just, I mean, you can try to get them from
Can't get
plants,
enough.
but
You
you're gonna
cannot
have
get
to
enough.
consume, you're gonna have to consume massive amount of certain powders or and then potentially people just going to start increasing eating all these other foods that appear to be healthy and then may get to the issue of overload of oxalates. Let's talk about one other important point, right? So the critique about oxalates that I hear from not just patients but also from some other practitioners goes like this. Well, if you look at the list that's high, there's some really good foods there. Good foods for a second, right? So like blueberries and beet greens and chard and spinach. So you cut all those foods out, where am I going to get my micronutrients? I think there's a lot of misconception because first of all, you don't have to get rid of them completely. If you want to have a tablespoon of blueberries, nothing's going to happen to you. I mean, we're talking about the volumes here. This is not all or nothing.
Yeah, and blueberries aren't even that high in oxalate.
Exactly.
You can have a half cup of blueberries, that's fine. It's the
Right.
blackberries. So it's so ridiculous. If this was lead or mercury laced food, you wouldn't say eat. I mean, kale is laced with bad stuff. And somehow it still gets a pass. Like plants have this
Even
halo
when it's
that's
organic?
undeserved.
Even when it's organic, I thought the organic.
Yeah, because they concentrate heavy metals. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they concentrate heavy metals. And that's, a lot of plants do that. So they're loaded with things we put on them too. But the fiber and the anti-nutrients like oxalate make the supposed nutrients that are in there irrelevant. And somehow nutritional science and medical science has failed to concern themselves with bioavailability of nutrients. And that is sad.
Yeah.
That is fundamental. We've known that bioavailability is the key thing for 100 years. In modern medicine and nutrition field doesn't seem to care about that. There is negative calcium in spinach. Negative. Calcium is critical to cells. Like you've got something that's making you calcium deficient and making your bloodstream calcium deficient and making your cells calcium deficient. And you interrupt calcium management in a cell, the whole function of the cell starts to break down, especially if you're a nerve cell. I mean, imagine a nerve cell who can't control its electrolytes and its calcium. That is how you get to dementia and neurological degeneration for sure.
Okay, so you basically start with you're gonna take a complete patient's diet, what they eat. You're gonna be very clear. Then you're gonna cut out one or two or maybe up to three, right? In the beginning of the food.
Yeah, just a few. Just a few, yeah. Because there's many reasons for this. One is you want sustainable change and really a dramatic change in how you shop, what you eat, how you cook, having to like rethink what you do every day is so demanding for an adult who's got a job and kids and a routine to maintain. It's really tough. And if you're sick, really sick, it's difficult. So there's a mental, emotional trauma, but then there's a physical trauma too, because there's a signaling, the body's listening for how much.
The body knows, and if you carefully, and the moment you cut out the foods that are toxic for you, the body will tell you. I think that's one thing that there's often like, oh, I'm going to listen to an expert. Your body is the most important expert. Don't ever forget that. People often just kind of walk right through that because somebody else said that cannot be true, and that always.
I see that all the time in my clients, especially the women, all the time. They say, this didn't agree with me, but everyone says it's good for me. So I kept doing it. I kept doing it because that's what they told me. So we're letting our head be filled with notions and our body's screaming at us saying, no, no, no. And we can't honor ourselves and our own wisdom.
So, all right. So the patients start sometimes get better. Talk a little bit about, because we do see dumping periodically. So sometimes patients, when you start this a bit more aggressive, I don't see this too often, but periodically I do. How would you handle it? So the patients start cutting out some foods and suddenly for a while they get this flare. So the joints may flare or whatever. I mean, whatever the core symptoms that is happening, they may get worse. So how would you handle the flares generally?
Right. So, interesting, everyone should be aware that this is very idiosyncratic and it's different for each person, how it shows up, what it looks like when it shows up. I've had people come to me who went from high oxalate keto with all this almond everything to full carnivore, which is pretty much a zero oxalate diet, pretty abruptly, and did fine for 2 or 3 years. And one guy came to me 3 years in, and he was suddenly sick as a dog and really disabled, and got into this heavy
So the
illness.
dumping doesn't have to happen immediately. It
No,
can be way down the line.
it could be
Wow.
way down the
I
line,
didn't
which is,
know that.
yeah, well, I'm sitting here with people coming to me self-diagnosing with oxalate problems. So they come to me when the crisis hits. And
Huh.
it's so interesting how different everybody is. And this is
Why is
why
it
I
happening?
started doing client work, because
Why is
this
it
is
happening?
my clinical education. Why is this happening? We all want to know, why is this happening? My theories, and it's just complete supposition based on observation and thinking hard about the literature, is that I often see with the kidney stone guys, they start getting the flare-ups with arthritis or finally get relief from their gout and arthritis about 1.5 years into the diet. And so it is my feeling that it takes a year or better for the kidneys to recover. And the body's prioritizing this exit route.
Body's just gonna hold on until it's ready to. I mean, it's a lot smarter than we
Open,
think.
you got to have the doors open. You can't
Yeah.
pull the fire alarm on the football stadium with the doors shut.
Right.
And that's basically what would happen. And that's really dangerous. And that lands people into the emergency room with hypertension and pulsing, high pulse, all kinds of crazy stuff. They feel like they're having a stroke. This is the huge electrolyte crash that can occur if the body's spitting out all this acid. It starts chelating the calcium, and you end up with severe cardiac kind of symptoms. And it literally can cause stroke, heart attack, cancer, like all the major things we say we're worried about in public health, osteoporosis, plus all that cardiac.
So, you brought up a critical aspect. There is a potential for this issue to be so much bigger than anybody ever thought. And yet, to my understanding, nobody's seriously researching this, right? I mean, there is no money.
Well, there's little, the problem is that, we have NIH that has these departments, and so you have to submit to a certain department to get a grant, and you have to speak that language and stay within that language. And all of the funding for oxalate since about the 1960s has been for kidney stones.
Mhm.
So we decided to ignore the effects on the immune cells, the vascular system, the liver, you
Right.
name it. We're
Well, I
ignoring it.
would also presume that it's not easy to study, right? Because
It's really hard to study.
Yeah, because there's, you have to get a tissue, right? Because you can't, there's no, it's not in the blood. If it's not coming into the urine, then okay, you don't have that compartment. So you're basically left out with getting tissue samples, which is way, way more complicated than getting blood or urine, probably.
Yeah, and the tissue samples, in order to really understand what's going on, do you need live cells? Do you need to watch the biopsy piece while it's still alive? Do you need to grab the cadaver, the minute?
So the one thing I recently started doing, and I think that would be the last kind of question from my end, and then we'll have to wrap up. So, I've started sending patients to one of my local colleague who's doing live cell analysis, and he finds oxalates there all the time. And now I've kind of evolved a bit more practical approach where he tells me, look, I think there's a lot of them. And regardless of what I see in the urine, I may just immediately tell the patients, okay, oxalates first, and then we'll deal with potentially other things. I've actually managed a number of Lyme patients this way, because everybody was telling them, oh, it's all Lyme. I send them to this doc. He says, now there may be some, some biofilms, maybe there is some Lyme in there, but oxalates are everywhere. So we would get, I just recently had a patient, get them off the oxalate slowly, and the person, all these issues resolved basically. And then we don't even care that there is a history of Lyme. I don't even know if the patient actually ever had a true Lyme related illness, even though he's been through half a dozen of Lyme experts in the past couple of years. So,
Totally
maybe that's a possible frontier, but I mean, I don't know. I'm not aware of any other way.
Chronic infections, that would be, there's many different frontiers. The thyroid function, because there's so many of us are collecting oxalate in the thyroid, the immune cell effects. There is a group who, this what I call the three musketeers of oxalate research, who are in retirement age. One of the three of them is retired already, They're down now at the University of Alabama in Birmingham, and they've set up a whole big institute of oxalate research, and they've got a bunch of really young crackerjacks coming up. And one of them is Tanisha Mitchell. She's in charge of this whole big lab, and she's the one who studied the effect on the immune cells. And so she's going in the immune cell direction, but in the context of, therefore, the immune cells can't handle the kidney stones very well. Like, she has to put it in that context, because that's who wants to fund. That's how you get oxalate funding, is through research on kidneys. So she's able to talk about immune cells if she couches it in the terms of, therefore, it matters for your kidney stones, as if your immune system didn't matter for everything, including the fact that now you can't fight these infections and you get chronic, sinus and you name it, infections. And we see in oxalate land that you see a resurgence of old infections releasing from these crystals. You see, things like cold sores and athlete's foot and Lyme's and Epstein-Barr coming back, or just showing up for the first time while you're clearing oxalate, and then easily being gone. So people with chronic infections, mold infections, they all clear up on the oxalate diet in my, client base. It's amazing.
Right. So we have to wrap up. What's next for you? I mean, I'm presuming your practice is overflowing. Are you going to train somebody? I mean, somebody has to. You've been successful. I've sent a number of patients to you, and some of them did extremely well. So what's next?
So I'm working on a video class that you can purchase off of my website. It's basic, 15 modules, basic, and it'll be an add-on for providers and be support for providers for learning this more deeply. Maybe we'll do journal clubs or things in the future. I need to get through these production issues with getting the data out there and getting the video products done, so that we can do more of this kind of clinical conversation, both with providers and patients, but also create communities where we can all communicate together about what we're finding out, because we need to build a learning organism, because the mainstream science is so slow.
We need to build cases that will have some objectivity built into them. I'm very big on taking a successful story and showing before and after. I think the problem here,
and that's coming out if we could just publish them.
Well, so I think that if we just use urine oxalates, that's great. That's not easy to do, because, as you said, inconsistency of results makes it a bit trickier. But maybe that's one place to do it, where it's to just have successful stories before and after oxalate in the urine.
Well, you see this, fibrinogen levels come down. You see this in the white cell counts get back up to normal. A lot of us with oxalate problems have suppressed, function and suppressed cell production, because it's affecting the bone marrow and it's affecting the lifespan of the cells. So you end up sluggish in different ways. And the blood markers improve. But interestingly, we also see liver markers go up while you're clearing oxalate later and you're doing the healing work. And you can get some really crazy tests down the road that's just part of this weird metabolism of recovery.
Well, wonderful. Sally, thank you so much for coming. Again, a fascinating book. If you haven't seen it, Toxic Superfoods on Amazon. 4.8 review. 4.8 people. That's hard to get. That's over 500 reviews. So how people find you and your website, maybe you can just say it, and then of course I'll make sure it's in the description.
Yeah, my website is sallyknorton.com. You got to remember the K to get the right Sally, sallyknorton.com. And you can reach out to us there, write to us. I am a one-person show. I really need to get some staff, and my husband helps me out with the customer service, which is what you're writing to through the website. Mm-hmm. And he's better about sticking to emails till midnight than I am. So please reach out to us, and you can join into my group meetings. I do group meetings to teach this with slides and so on, and have people share stories. And so there's more and more things coming along. If you want to stay in touch, you might want to join my email list.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend. Everybody stay safe, learn. This is Ben's topic. Book is outstanding. And I'll see you back here at all kinds of things, integrative medicine, health, and wellness. Stay safe, friends. Bye.